let's get started. My name is Lisa Kaplowitz. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Rutgers Center for Women in Business. I am also re-entry person as well. So I had a career in investment banking and finance, and then I took a couple years off and stayed home with the kids, and then came back and now have found myself as a professor here at Rutgers and running the center. What the center does is three things. We remove barriers, build communities, and empower women with confidence and skills to succeed as leaders. And that is what we are going to try to do today for those of you that might have taken some time off from work, or employers that are looking to hire folks who have incredible skills that can be tapped. I want to introduce my panelists here with me. I am excited to have them. Carol Fishman Cohen, she is the CEO and co-founder of iRelaunch. She also has a TED Talk to check out, how to get back to work after a career break, that has almost 4 million views. So thank you, Carol, for being with us.
Nice to be here.
I have Sarah Klopfer, who is the global program leader for Reignite, Johnson & Johnson's career reentry program. She is going to tell you all about that. In addition to drive results in a variety of human resource roles, she is an HR business partner and heads up the office of TEDx in New Jersey. We've got a lot of TED stuff going on here. I also have Abby Kelly. She's a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist for Audible that has a decade in workforce development experience. And she runs one of the most recognized returnship programs, Audible's Next Chapter Returnship program. And last but not least, we have Brett Hemmerling. He is a vice president on the Moody's people team, and he's responsible for early careers and program talent acquisition. He also is in charge of the mid-career level program, including Reignite, which is the Returnship program. So thank you all for being here. I want to kick this off with just getting a sense of who's in our audience. You can scan the QR code or text RBS CWIB 401. So you're going to text to phone number 3760, and you are going to text the message RBS CWIB 401. It's probably easier to scan the QR code. And while you're doing that, so scan the QR code, I want to let everyone know that this webinar is recorded. We want to make it engaging. We're going to be monitoring the chat. So we cannot see hands raised, but we do want to answer all of your questions and be engaged. So I think we have the poll everywhere link there. Who is here? Am I an employee or am I a company provides and wants to provide returnship opportunities? It looks like most of us are employees. So that's a great framework for us as we talk through the different programs and opportunities and pathway of how to start this whole process and be successful. What we want to know, and this is a word cloud, so enter it with one word only. That's how it works best. What are some challenges that you have with returning to work after a career break? What are some of the challenges? Low response rate, ageism, salary, being taken seriously, undecided, the technology gap. I love word clouds, by the way. Aren't they fun? Slow response, the salary, the fit, interviewing, knowledge gaps. I think gaps, and I think we're looking at a lot of this. I see childcare on here. I see resume, being taken seriously, the opportunities that exist. We are having a lot of fun. Thinking that your skills are outdated. Childcare, we're going to talk about childcare a lot. Awesome. This is great. So I think this does frame us to really start the conversation. Really appreciate all of your responses. Oh my gosh, this thing is going crazy. But really the gap, the low response rate, lack of experience, or our thought of lack of experience when really we do have a lot of experience. We're going to put a link up because we're actually doing a survey and we'd love all of you all to participate. So Viviana, as we get further along, if we could post that, the center's running a survey to talk about the experiences that we've developed as caregivers and how they're actually really helpful in the workplace. So hopefully that will create even more opportunities for folks. So I am going to stop talking, and I want our panelists just to share a little bit about your connection with relaunching and career reentry programs. So Carol, I'm going to start with you because you have some really deep experience in this and can kind of set the stage for what these programs are.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Fishman Cohen, the CEO and co-founder of iRelaunch, and we're the pioneering company in the career reentry space. We've been working to lead and shape it for almost 2 decades. And we work with employers to build and expand their career reentry programs. And I'm realizing we have some great examples right here on the panel. We worked with Johnson & Johnson to create their Reignite program through a collaboration called the STEM Reentry Task Force that we run with the Society of Women Engineers. We work with Moody's on the India expansion of their career reentry program, also called Reignite. Audible and its parent Amazon have used our job board, and all have sponsored our iRelaunch Return to Work conferences. So those are just examples of how we work with employers. And then we also, and probably most importantly for this audience, support a community of over 100,000 relaunchers, as we call people who are making this journey, who are in all stages of returning to work after career breaks from 1 to over 20 years. And I'll add that I'm a relauncher myself. I took an 11-year career break from my finance career, which I then later returned to before co-founding iRelaunch.
And Abby, tell us about your connection with relaunching and career reentry programs.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. Before I joined Audible last year, I worked at an organization that I bet many people on this line are familiar with called Path Forward, which is a nonprofit that empowers people to get back to the workforce. They partner with employers to help build custom programs, and they also coach hundreds and thousands of returnees to help them get the confidence and the skills they need to get back into the workforce. And so it's been a big part of my own career journey. I'm not a relauncher myself, but I am a new mom. And so I also understand a little bit what it's like trying to have a fulfilling, meaningful career while also tending to my loved ones.
And Sarah?
So I had a bit of a career break, but not in the traditional sense. I was a career shifter. I had an internship in the middle of a 2-year MBA program. I got to work with Johnson & Johnson and joined Johnson & Johnson through our HR leadership development program, where you mentioned I had the opportunity to sit in different areas of HR, serve as an HR business partner. And since then, I've been in the global talent management space, supporting our TEDx J&J program and other initiatives. And really through conversations, through some of the programs I've led, had an appreciation for just the different journeys and stories that have brought people to where they are today. And I'm really excited to be leading the Reignite Career Reentry program at J&J. And for us, we're across the globe. So again, hearing different stories of why people have taken career breaks and what's bringing them back is really special. And I have the honor of being the second program leader at J&J, so love to see the longevity of the program.
And Brett, tell us your connection. And by the way, it's really important to also know that relaunchers aren't just women. So Brett, I'm happy that you're here representing all of our genders here.
Yeah, no, me too. Thank you so much, Lisa. So my journey is, I've been with Moody's for a long time, and I was involved in the launch of our employee resource groups. And that really got me thinking that diversity was the direction I wanted to go with my career. And that led me eventually to campus recruitment. And my manager at the time launched the Reignite program at Moody's. So I wasn't directly involved with it, but I saw it from inception to launch to sort of the evolution in the early years. A few years ago, I moved to London and then found out that we were bringing Reignite to London. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to, raise my hand and 100% say this is something I want to do. I was asked to take it on, and now I've got the global responsibility for the program, which is not just US and UK, but also Canada, India, and we've just moved into France. Like I think Abigail said, I am super excited about this topic, and I would love to spend any and all times that I've asked to join the session to cover it. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you all. Carol, can you just kick us off and tell us a little bit about what a career reentry program is? How do they get started and how they kind of evolved over time? And then from there, we're going to jump into each one of you to talk about specifically your programs.
Career reentry programs have been around for a long time. They've been around since about 2005. And in fact, Ann Ernie, who is the Chief People Officer of Audible, led one of the earliest career reentry programs. It was called Encore at the investment bank Lehman Brothers. So she was involved at the very beginning. And then a few years later, Goldman Sachs started the first Returnship program, which is a career reentry program using an internship-like experience to engage with people who are returning after career breaks. And about 80% of career reentry programs use the returnship model. The other 20% use a model called direct hire, where that means relaunchers or returners are hired as employees from day one. A note on the returnship programs, the conversion rates of these programs, meaning the percentage of people who are hired when the program completes, are averaging over 85%. So it's a long-running model and very successful. But regardless of whether it's a returnship or direct hire model, the programs provide specialized support to the participants because, as many of you are anticipating this, and some of us who have been through it know, this is a significant personal and professional transition. And so that support is in the form of customized programming and training and coaching for the participants themselves, managers and other stakeholders, people who have contact with the participants in the program get their own training. There's mentoring. There is often a cohort structure where people come into the program as a group and move through the early weeks or months of the program together. So I think I'll stop there and turn it back over to you, Lisa.
I think that's a great setup. When we talk about diversity, we also want to talk about diversity of function and diversity of industry. And so as we were curating this panel, we were really intentional to make sure that we didn't have everyone from the same industry. So we have, somebody from finance, somebody from tech, and somebody from pharma. We could have had a lot more, but panels are better with 3 to 4 people. So we kept it small. And these really are gold star type programs. So Brett, I want to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about Moody's program? Give some insight. Who's eligible? Are they remote? Are they in person? Are they hybrid? Can you talk a little bit about what Moody's specifically does?
It's been an evolution, which I'm sure we'll talk about that whole concept at some point in this discussion today, but our general requirements have remained the same since the beginning. So we're looking for individuals that have had a minimum of, and then that's preceded by minimum of 5 years of work experience. There is flexibility on that, absolutely 100%. So if someone doesn't quite meet those requirements, either of them or both of them, we will consider them on a case-by-case basis. And I think that's fairly common in this space. Beyond that, the requirements are really going to be role specific. So in most of our locations, we are running a rolling admission. So it might be a direct hire, like Carol had mentioned, but it also might be a returnship model. But what this means is that people are joining us on an individual basis, a very loose cohort for their region or a global cohort, if you will. But they've got their own timeline in terms of when they start, how the program is delivered, some of the components. We didn't start that way, but we are running it currently that way because it makes Reignite as accessible as possible to our business leaders. And we think to a lot of candidates as well. So instead of saying they need to wait a certain number of months or weeks, whatever, for a cohort to start, we can start them, as you will, in real time, like we would with any sort of standard recruitment process. In theory, that means that any position should be eligible for Reignite. That's a work in progress, but definitely that where we want to get to in terms of the long-term goal for Reignite at Moody's, so that we have this program, which isn't sort of standalone, but something that we offer to anyone that joins Moody's that has had a career break and might need some extra support during those crucial early months. That's where we're getting to. In terms of the working pattern, our general philosophy on work at Moody's right now is fully hybrid. So some people work 100% remote, some people come in most days. It's really on a case-by-case basis for every team and every department. We don't have a stamp on that. And that's been quite good for people that are looking to return as well. So they have some flexibility.
That's really helpful. Sarah, talk to us about J&J's program.
A lot of similarities, actually. As Moody's, we welcome experienced professionals who have taken a career break for 2 years or longer. And Brett mentioned, we have conversations with folks. Everyone's career break looks a little bit different. Sometimes people aren't sure, where do I fit in here? And we're happy to have those individual conversations with folks. In terms of where the roles are, so like I mentioned earlier, we're across all 4 regions in 13 countries right now, but we will be wherever there are jobs and eligible candidates. A little bit of a mix of what Carol was sharing. We started specifically with the returnship model, and now we are a mix of direct hire and returnships. And again, much like Moody's, we started in a cohort model. We are mostly rolling admission right now. We do have a country or two where, based on local needs, the cohort model works best. But the way that our program is set up, we offer opportunities for active participants and alumni to come together, to network, to learn together, so that even if it's not that cohort model, not everyone's on the same schedule, there's opportunity to connect and have that support. And where with our Reignite program, it started specifically for STEM 2D, so science, technology, engineering, math, manufacturing, and design opportunities. We are function agnostic, so we welcome folks across all different functions across the globe. So as Brett mentioned, again, these are just really great opportunities and programs where we continue to evolve based on what's going on in the world, what's going on in the business.
I love how both of you also emphasize the community part of it, because one of the challenges that folks have who've been out, and especially women, is we feel like we need to do this by ourselves. And if we ask questions, then are people going to question our intellect and our ability and capabilities? And so having that group of folks, and if that group's not available, having alumni and having that support, I think is really important. I love hearing that. Abby, tell us a little bit about Audible's program.
Well, we were just talking about this before we went live. I think Audible has the best named program. I'm just going to say it. The Audible's Next Chapter Returnship program. The first cohort started back in February of 2021. It's a 16-week paid mid-career internship opportunity for folks that have at least 5 years of professional experience, but who have also been out of the workforce for at least a year or more. Although I'll say that on average, most of our participants have been out for 5 or more years. And as you can imagine, in a tech-driven company, most of our roles tend to focus in the tech field. So things like quality assurance engineering, software development, but we've also had things like product managers, technical program managers, and even marketing roles. Our goal, of course, is that whenever both there's performance and a business need, that we're able to then convert folks into full-time opportunities. We have great success with that, but we also are very committed to the fact that no matter what, whether there's a full-time position at the end of the program or not, that folks are walking away with so much more than when they came in. They've got new experience they can put on their resume, new stories to tell in interviews. They've got an expanded network, and that they've learned a lot about themselves, their skill set, and how they can apply it into today's workforce. And I think we're very mindful at Audible that it's a two-sided evaluation. We are absolutely evaluating our returners for longer-term longevity on our team, but we understand that they are also evaluating us. And so we want to make sure that we're showing them all that we have to offer. They're seeing our great culture, that they have access to our learning and development resources, and that Audible's a place they can see themselves thriving longer term.
We're getting a lot of questions just to us and also to the general audience. So I'm a big believer in going where the energy is. So there are a lot of questions. How do I take advantage of these programs? How do I get started? Where do I go? And it's going to be different for each company, but then also companies like iRelaunch have these amazing conferences. So let's start big picture, and then we can go smaller. Carol, how do folks start to take advantage of these things?
So there are so many places where people can take advantage. Definitely, iRelaunch.com. We have tons of resources. I know Path Forward has tons of resources. And the conference that we have coming up is probably a really good place to start. Some people sort of make it an official marker, like this is going to be the official beginning. It's a virtual conference, the iRelaunch Return to Work Conference. It's happening May 9th through 11th. And right now, if you're listening to this, you can use a code and come in for free. And I think it's being posted in the chat. But that's 2 days of intense content, including hearing from employers about their programs. And then the third day is a virtual career fair. And in advance of it, that's in a couple of weeks, but in advance of it, next week, we do a prep call. And so that would be something else I would recommend people come on board. And you get access to something called the iRelaunch Return to Work Roadmap, which is really 35 stages, 30 steps, taking you through every possible piece of the relaunch journey. And you can sort of dive in at any point. I think that's important. And then community is really important. So this idea of not going through it by yourself. So I love, when Brett and Sarah are talking about a loose cohort or a community, if you're having rolling admissions. So there's a critical mass of relaunchers inside the organization that you now join, even though they're alumni, they've graduated. So that's powerful. But before that, to not approach this process by yourself, we have the iRelaunch Return to Work Forum. That's a private Facebook group. You're welcome to join that. You have to answer questions. There are probably 12,000 people in it, most active part. And you'll hear people are really vulnerable and they're really honest there. And they're saying, here's what I'm worried about. Here's what happened. There's a lot of peer interaction and advice going on there too. So that's just a few resources I'll throw out for starters.
One thing I want to know for the audience here is this is not a recruiting event. And so companies don't have necessarily cohorts all the time. So there is that cohort model that we talked about, but it's also somewhat bespoke and opportunistic as roles come about to get folks to go through these programs. And those that have cohorts, they might be in the middle of process, so another one might launch soon. So what we were trying to do with this webinar is give you examples of how certain programs work, give you additional resources to try. And they might be at these companies and they might be at other companies. And I know my friends at Audible and J&J and Moody's would love to have you on their teams, but they're also doing this to help you better understand how this all works together. Abby, I'm going to start with you. There have been a lot of questions going through the chat of what constitutes relaunching. What if I've been out of work for only a year? What if I, have downsized because maybe I've been taking care of my parent or my kids and I've been, doing some gig work or have a small business? Can I still go in? What if I'm a veteran? Are there other programs? So Abby, can I start with you? And then Brett and Sarah, I'm going to go to you with that.
From my experience at Path Forward and certainly for Audible, I think these programs are really meant to be inclusive. I don't think that any of the companies represented here have these very, very hard lines where, oh, you didn't check that box, you're not eligible, but they're guidelines. And that's how our recruitment team is trained, is to think about these as guidelines. But I would say, it comes with how you present your experience. So on your resume, making sure that it's really clear that if you're applying to a return to work program, that gap is evident. And maybe you have been doing some consulting work, freelance work, part-time work, underemployed, but you want to make that in a separate section on your resume, maybe something like other experience, and make sure that gap is clear. Because if that's the eligibility criteria and it's not clear, recruiters aren't going to think that you qualify for the program. So don't format your resume in a way that makes it seem like you're not part of this talent pool when you actually are. That would be my first piece of advice.
Abby, that is so important. And I think, if we think back to when we first started our careers, right? We used to have different resumes for different jobs depending on what we wanted to do, right? I had a different resume for consulting versus investment banking because you want to position your skills to know your audience, right? We learned that when we're younger. Brett, what about you? Can you talk specifically about Moody's? I think you already alluded to the fact that they're also not hard and fast rules.
Yeah, one is the veterans question. Some companies I know do roll veterans into their relauncher program. We don't at Moody's. We would keep that as separate because it is a bit of a different experience, what that would entail. So we break that out. I think a lot of companies, I actually don't know the mix, but it goes both ways depending on the company. For us, like I said before, everyone's journey is different. So just being very clear on what journey you've been on or what you're looking to do is really important. Depending on the company, recruiters may be really savvy to understand, oh, hey, this person's had a career break, but sometimes you have to hit them over the head with it. So, just kind of be ready to do that, I think is the main thing that I would highlight.
And Sarah, what about you? What about J&J?
I would just echo everything that's been said in terms of being willing to share that this is the position you're in, this is the journey that you've had, because more and more through folks like Carol and all of these employers and others, it's more commonplace and people understand and appreciate the value that a returner can bring. So don't be afraid to fly that flag. And again, same thing, the hard and fast rules. That's why we like to have individual conversations, better understand where folks are coming from. We've had folks who've come through different journeys on their break. Some did completely different jobs and stepped out of the corporate world. Some were primarily caregivers. There's a whole range of things. And so we're happy to have those conversations. At the end of the day, it's really about helping people find a pathway back and support once they get here.
I just want to quickly add, don't self-select out. If you're in doubt, apply and let the employer make the decision about whether you're eligible or not.
That is a great point. There's a classic study that looked at folks that were applying to jobs, and this doesn't even have to do with, reentry. Women only applied to jobs if they met 100% of all the eligible criteria. Men do it if they're like, yeah, I got 60% of this. And so, Carol, I think that's a great point. Don't self-select yourself out. There's an assumption that this is all AI based. So One thing I want to ask, I always tell my kids, don't assume. I also tell employers I work with all the time too. Don't assume she doesn't want that promotion. Don't assume she doesn't want to travel. Don't assume she's not the breadwinner. Is AI picking out these things? And if not, then you've got a human. And so that deflects the question. And if it is, how do you position this, Abby? I think you gave us some good feedback to put it as other things. Is AI looking through these applications?
No, I'll start if that's okay. No, and I think what makes a successful program is really starting with the training of your recruitment team. You know, we're asking them to do something that's maybe feels counterintuitive to what they've done in the past, where the idea is you need to screen people in for potential. I think that's the foundation of any successful program, and certainly was vital to the success of Audible's program, was having that training on mitigating bias, looking for transferable skills. To the folks that are typing into the chat, you know, I love Carol's point about don't self-select out, but also certainly want to acknowledge the bias that does exist, that you are running up against every day. You know, there are studies that show you're half as likely to receive a call back from a recruiter if you've got an unexplained gap on your resume, right? So we know that there's a bias. So position yourself as best as you can. And our job as companies offering these programs is to make sure that our teams on the ground screening these resumes are looking for your potential and not counting you out.
I agree with Abby. Same thing at Johnson & Johnson. And that applies both to reignite roles and traditional roles, as I mentioned before. We welcome participants who are eligible for the program regardless of their entry point. And so it's not just about talking with, and it may be different every company. We have some recruiters who are sort of point people for Reignite, and then we've got our entire global recruiting team. And so much like Abby said, it's really about making sure that all of our recruiters have a sense of this is what the program is, here's what it exists to do, understanding that it can apply to anyone regardless of how they're coming in, and just sort of to be on the lookout for that. And again, that's why sort of calling it out and waving that flag on your resume is helpful to us to recognize, oh, this is someone who could be eligible for the program and maybe looking for a different kind of support.
I don't know if we have employers on the call or not, but I know that was potentially going to happen. So I'll just say advice to them is activate your broader recruitment arm as quickly as possible to be a part of this. You know, I think most programs, at least ours, started with dedicated people who this was something that they did in addition to a bunch of other things, and then found out that, you know, everyone sort of needs to have the tools to do this if we're going to succeed. So doing that as quickly as possible, and then, you know, celebrating when someone hires a reigniter and things like that is something that we do now just to, again, kind of keep the momentum going.
Carol, you know, we have representatives from 3 different companies, but you deal with hundreds of companies. Is there anything else that's different at a lot of other companies? Did we, you know, have just too small of a sample? Is there a lot of AI based? And is there anything else that you could guide companies part of the recruiting process?
We have a really good sampling here, and I think everyone's pretty much covered the basics. The other piece of it, though, is it really starts with the manager and how open the managers are to allocating certain of their open headcount roles to the program or to the idea of hiring a returner and isolating that pool. So they're not competing with people who don't have career breaks, but they're in their own pool because they have their own attributes and their own potential. I think we've covered the basics here.
There were a lot of questions in the chat about tech skills. You know, I don't see roles in my specific area. Can you talk a little bit about what companies are doing, and then we'll go to the specific companies, if any of you are doing anything specific, about upskilling and what kind of skills companies are looking for now that maybe were different if I left the workforce 10 years ago?
Are we talking specifically about employers that have career reentry programs in place?
Yeah.
So remember, these programs are competitive, and the people who are already demonstrating that they're fearless learners, lifelong learners, that they're trying to identify areas where I'll speak to those of you who are applying. You have to figure out what you want to do all over again. Part of that is becoming a subject matter expert all over again. And subject matter expertise is hard. So that means that you need to understand what are the new products and services in your field? Why aren't we using the old ones anymore? What are the acronyms? What are the controversies? Who are the experts? What are they debating? And so going through that process yourself is a form of informal updating in addition to maybe taking formal coursework or getting some sort of a certification. And all of those are signals to the recruiters and to the employers that run these programs that you are really ready. You are actively working to update yourself before you even get in the door. Then once the programs are in place, and there's a huge range depending on what kind of program, what the functions are. Some of our consulting companies have like training segments of their program when people first come in, then they're shadowing on certain consulting clients, and then they are in a role where they're an active part of a team. That might be very different from a different company's role where you're just part of the active client-facing team or the internal team, whatever you're doing right from the first day, and you're doing training concurrently or alongside. The one thing that I would mention is we're working with hundreds and thousands of relaunchers over a long period of time. And what we find to be common is when people are feeling like they're working a second shift. They're working during the day just to keep their head above water and try to do everything they have to do for their job. And then at night, they're thinking, I didn't get that. I got to look that up. Or what does that mean? Or I have to. So there's going to be some of that at the beginning of your experience, and just understand that's not the status quo. That's just something that happens at the beginning and it sort of levels off over time. There's an individual updating component to make yourself most knowledgeable and competitive. And then there's another training component that is often part of the programs once you're in the door.
I want to talk about technical skills, and then I want to talk about leadership skills. I don't want to call them soft skills because they're actually much harder. But let's talk about the technical side. Yeah. Do I need to take a coding class? Do I need to brush up on my Excel? Are there those technical skills that I need to see that I'm doing?
It depends on what role you're applying to, but I like to point to software development engineer for a good example. Most people that are in these programs, they used to be a software engineer prior to their career break, and most of them have a degree in computer science. And when you go to school and you get a bachelor's in computer science, you're not getting a degree in JavaScript. Instead, you're getting this degree that says, I know how to learn. I know the computer science fundamentals. The coding language is just the car, right? But you already know how to drive. Certainly, you want to maybe take a refresher, maybe do some boot camps on things like Udemy or Udacity, just to get that muscle flexing again. This program is built upon the idea that you can do this because you've done it before. And maybe the on-ramp is a little bit more supported. Maybe it takes a little bit longer than someone who was doing it yesterday, but that you can do it. You know how to drive. I am just going to throw in the chat here in case it's helpful, not to plug my former employer again, but there are some really great free content, including some webinars on how to restart your tech career at that link I just shared in the chat. So definitely check that out.
Everything Abby said is spot on, and couldn't have said it better myself. And I'll just add on to that, that in addition to everything Abby mentioned, folks who are coming into an established career reentry program typically have structure of support. They have managers who understand the transition that this person is making and what comes along with that. You know, as part of our Reignite program, and frankly, having worked with iRelaunch and the STEM Reentry Task Force, everyone comes in with a technical peer, in addition to having a career reentry buddy. So someone who's been through a similar experience before, but we ask all managers to identify a technical peer so that there is someone people can go to with questions. And I think that's really helpful as folks are just finding their footing, but there's a level of understanding on what people are overcoming in returning to work. And so there are support mechanisms to help with that.
One thing that we're seeing is with rolling admissions is that we're actually asking each person before they come in, what do they think they need to refresh? What do they think they need to upskill? And then getting that set up for them on an individual basis before they join. And then obviously checking in with them, checking in with their manager a couple weeks in to see if there's things we need to add, and really going back to like the broader training library that we have within the company and making sure that they have full access to that. And that's been really quite helpful because everybody's different in terms of what they need to refresh, especially. What I would say that we've seen that's been really helpful is getting people to join parts of our company that are new, that are launching, where we're just looking for smart people, you know, that are excited and committed to working. and they're going to learn with the rest of the team because it's a brand new area of business for us. So, I mean, if you find opportunities like that, I would say that's probably a good place to start if you are not quite sure what you want to do or how your skills might align to an existing business.
I love that. Also, because folks that have left the workforce also acquire, you might have left and you already might have been at the manager, director, C-suite level and are taking a pause and coming back for one reason or another. So you have these leadership skills. You have these other attributes. I'm putting a link to the survey, which I want you to click on and then do after we're done, because I don't want you to miss what we're talking about. But the Center for Women in Business is launching a survey about how your caregiving experience, and that could be caregiving for a parent, a child, disabled relative, friend, etc., might actually be helpful in the workforce. And so as we talk about that, can you all talk about how I can highlight those skills that I acquired during my pause to employers? And then at the same time, from an employer standpoint, tell me why these folks are valuable for your teams.
As Abigail said, when you are applying to one of these career reentry programs, you actually want to have a section on your resume that says career break. And from this year to that year, and you can say career break for childcare reasons or career break for extended travel, or you don't have to say, but you could then say underneath it, there's some volunteer activity I was doing, that's a bullet point. Some recent and relevant coursework is a bullet point. Carol Fishman Cohen consulting, if I was doing occasional consulting, put it under the career break heading. So you're still delineating it, but you're showing that this was something you did during your career break. That side job that you have at Instacart just to pull in some extra income while you're on career break, that goes under the career break heading. That's the way to show some of these skills. But when you're being interviewed about them, they're probably going to say, can you give me an example of a significant experience when X happened, either in a pre-career break role or sometime during your career break, or in a paid or in a volunteer context? When you're practicing your answers to questions like that, and you want to have anecdotes about each significant prior volunteer and work experience, you can decide which anecdotes are going to be most relevant, what you're going to essentially script out for yourself and memorize, and have it in your back pocket ready to answer a question like that. So part of it is, how do you want to tell your story? The other thing I'll mention is, if you're referencing pre-career break experience and your career break was long, don't say, well, this was ancient history, but 15 years ago when I worked at X, we did this. You just talk about it as if it happened yesterday. When I was working at company X, we faced very similar customer challenges. Let me tell you about one of them. Or you could say, I solved a major logistics problem by managing my kids' high school marching band logistics. And it was people and instruments and uniforms and food that had to be moved from one place to another. And I used this project management software and this kind of Excel spreadsheet. And this is how I did it. And that can also be relevant. So of course, it depends what role you're interviewing for.
Why did you all start this program? Why are these relaunchers so valuable? And are there certain skills that you're all looking for?
Skills sort of run the gamut because, again,
right.
Well, we recruit for lots of different functions. But I think, agile learning, interest in making an impact, really wanting to get back to it. I mean, we find that those who are applying to our roles, those who are coming into our program, are so eager to exercise their passions again, get back to those passions, make an impact. So we see that excitement and really appreciate it. It makes an impact for the organization. And when we think about how we continue to innovate, how we continue to change the world and keep up with the world, get ahead of changes that are happening, it happens through diverse perspectives and experiences. And we recognize whether you are stepping away to be a parent and care for your children, if you're stepping away to care for your own health, further education, volunteering, whatever it is, it's those perspectives and experiences that one can bring to J&J or any other company to help us think about differently what we're doing, what we're solving for. And I think the best way to solve the problems that we're trying to solve is if we reflect the communities and the customers and consumers that we're trying to support. If we reflect them in our business, then we're that much more likely to be innovative in driving solutions that have an impact. And so I think that appreciation is felt across our sponsors and our leadership which is why we continue to evolve and grow the program, because folks are doing things every day that can contribute to what we're doing at J&J.
I co-sign everything Sarah just said, but for Audible, I mean, we are a company that was founded on this idea of disruptive innovation. And we also believe, in fact, we know that we need to have as many diverse voices at the table as possible to continue in that spirit of innovation. In terms of the skills that returners bring, just so many. I like how you call them leadership skills, not soft skills, but these are the things that make the world go round. Influence without authority, time management skills, emotional intelligence, and maturity. I mean, these folks that are coming into Audible through this Next Chapter program, yes, they may need some support on the tech side, but they are mature professionals and they're able to role model that for our junior staff, which is so, so helpful. And so I also want everyone on this call to know that you may need some support, but you give a lot. And companies are very, very fortunate to have you. And so we see that firsthand on the ground every day with our Next Chapter folks. In terms of thinking about your real life examples, your caregiving experiences, thinking about things like PTA volunteering. If you even have a difficult circumstance, children with special needs, you're gaining so many valuable skills through those experiences. So thread the needle and find out what's the through line, what's your story, practice it, because we think we're experts on ourselves, but it takes time to practice and carve a good narrative out.
No, I don't think you need a senior role. I'm just going to answer that one real quickly because we're almost out of time. As we are going through this, I'll call it our evolution in our life, we're trying to figure out what our reason for being is. And as we get to a certain point in our life and we've done certain careers and maybe we've taken a break and we're trying to figure out, do we want to do that same thing or we want to do something different? There's a concept, and I think I'm going to mispronounce it, so please correct me. Ikagi, it's a Japanese concept. It's spelled Ikagi, and it is 4 concentric circles. One is, basically, what do you like to do? What are you good at? What can you make money at? And what does the world need? And the intersection of all of that is really your reason for being. And I personally done this exercise multiple times throughout my career that's led me to what I'm doing right now. And so I would definitely challenge you all to do some sort of exercise like that as you're trying to figure out what it is you want to do, knowing that you still might have other responsibilities that you have to take care of. We are basically out of time. I know there's some really specific questions. I urge you to contact each of the programs, sign up for iRelaunch. I want to end this with final words of advice from each of our panelists.
I will say to the people that are looking to relaunch, so think about before you start the process, what's the ideal setup for you? Do you want to go back full time? Do you want hybrid working? Do you want a flexible working arrangement? Be clear on what you want and more importantly, what you don't want from your reentry experience. And then do your research, just like with any job hunt. Learn about the company, everything that they're doing, what's important to them, what are their struggles, their values, but then also make sure that you know what they have in terms of their program and what they offer so that you'll know before you get too involved, they get too involved, whether or not it even something that aligns with what you're looking for.
Thinking about what you might be overcoming to just start looking for a new opportunity or figuring out if you can see yourself back in the workforce. And so one of the things we talk about with our coaching program is around quieting the inner critic. So how do we overcome some of the naysayer voices in our head and really get back to those leadership, soft, hard skills that we have, how those are transferable? And, as Abby was saying before, lead with that, be able to tell your story from that perspective. It's tough, but we want to hear from you about what you're bringing to the table, and we believe that you're bringing a lot.
I don't know any overnight successes. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I know really easy for me to say that, harder to live it, but try and learn something from every interview that doesn't go well. Keep applying. I don't know any returnee who got the first returnship that they applied to. So keep at it. It's a long game. It's a long play. You can do this.
Picking up where Abigail just left off, we have a podcast called 321 iRelaunch, and we have a special mini series on prolonged job searches where we talk about the mental and emotional toll that a long period of rejection or just silence, no response at all, can have on the job seeker and the relauncher. So I urge people to listen to that because we really get into depth in our interviews about this topic. Spend the time not rushing into resume and interview, but upfront figuring out exactly what you want to do all over again. Go public with your job search. Don't spend all your time researching companies online and applying behind your computer. Rarely a successful strategy. And the subject matter expertise is not only to get you updated again, but it helps your confidence and it forces you to network when you have conversations. And it's the best antidote to ageism.
You know, there was a comment here on LinkedIn. Make sure your LinkedIn is updated. LinkedIn is incredible source. Leverage your universities. You can go on to where, hopefully it was Rutgers, but no judging if it wasn't. But you can go on to the company page of that university, CC alumni, and click on certain keywords and it'll show you what those folks have had. Folks that have gone to your school are happy to talk to you most of the time. So that's one. Also, you know, in LinkedIn, you can put that you had a gap. So somebody's not like, what happened? Was this person just not working? And so it actually shows up. The other thing, we talk about certificate programs. We talk about going back to school. We are a university. We have a ton of mini MBAs and certificate programs if you want to dust up your skills. We also have a mid-career mentoring program called Women Grow, gaining and retaining outstanding women. So take advantage of those opportunities. Also go to our website. We have a wealth of other webinars to talk about salary negotiation, imposter syndrome, feedback, etc., that help you there. I have to say a quick thank you to our corporate sponsors because without any of them, we would not be able to do and deliver any of this. So I just want to thank them. I want to thank our amazing panelists, Carol, Abby, Sarah, and Brett. You have been a phenomenal wealth of information. Very grateful. And to all of you seeking re-entry and all of you seeking to connect with those folks, I wish you all the best of luck in your journey.